Imagine firing off half of your entire precision military arsenal in just 6 weeks. It sounds like a hypothetical war game scenario, but it is the exact reality the world's most dominant superpower is facing right now. The recent conflict in the Middle East has exposed a massive, quiet crisis. We are seeing a global scramble for resources, shifting alliances, and a sudden realization that the hardware of modern defense relies entirely on materials controlled by geopolitical rivals. Today, we are breaking down the massive ripple effects of the US-Iran peace deal, the critical mineral bottleneck in Africa, and the widening strategic rift between the US and its closest allies.
It is a classic case of supply chain vulnerability meeting hard geopolitical reality. When you look at the sheer volume of munitions expended during the recent hostilities, things like Patriot interceptors and Tomahawk missiles, the numbers are staggering. Rebuilding those stockpiles isn't just a matter of turning on factory conveyor belts. It takes years, potentially until 2030 or beyond. And the real bottleneck isn't manufacturing capacity. It is the raw, strategic minerals that make these weapons function. We are talking about cobalt, lithium, titanium, and rare earth elements. Without them, the high-tech military apparatus is essentially grounded. And right now, one country controls nearly 90% of the processing and refining of those exact minerals.
And that country is China. It is fascinating because while the West was focused on foreign interventions and nation-building over the last 2 decades, Beijing was quietly executing a long-term resource strategy. They didn't just buy up mines, they built the refining infrastructure. So even if a mineral is dug out of the ground in South America or Africa, it almost always has to pass through Chinese processing plants before it can be used in a missile guidance system or an electric vehicle battery. This has created what defense analysts are calling a window of vulnerability for the United States.
Exactly. And that vulnerability is forcing a massive, urgent pivot toward Africa, which holds about 30% of the world's proven critical mineral reserves. Suddenly, we see the U.S. administration rushing to broker peace agreements in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, promising bilateral deals and corporate investments. But this isn't just out of sudden goodwill. It is a negotiation born of necessity. For the first time in decades, African nations have immense leverage because the superpower is negotiating from a position of urgent need rather than absolute strength.
It raises a crucial question about how African leaders will play their hand this time. Historically, the continent has exported raw materials and imported finished goods, capturing very little of the actual economic value. If you mine cobalt in the Congo, ship it to China for refining, and buy back the technology, you get the environmental degradation, while others get the wealth. Some countries, like Zimbabwe with its domestic lithium processing, are trying to change this. But to really shift the balance of power, wouldn't they need to negotiate collectively, like a unified critical minerals bloc?
Absolutely. Think back to the mid-20th century when European nations, devastated by war, formed the coal and steel community. They realized that individual, vulnerable nations negotiating alone would always lose to larger powers. By managing their resources collectively, they laid the foundation for massive economic sovereignty. If African nations formed a similar union, setting unified pricing floors and demanding that processing facilities be built on African soil as a condition for resource access, it would completely rewrite the global economic map. It would transform raw minerals into local jobs, infrastructure, and long-term industrialization.
While this scramble for African minerals is happening, there is an equally intense drama unfolding in the Middle East. The US-sponsored peace deal with Iran was designed to stabilize the region, open up shipping routes like the Strait of Hormuz, and bring down global oil prices. But this deal has created a major strategic divergence with Israel. From the American perspective, de-escalation is the priority, especially with domestic economic pressures and elections on the horizon. But from the Israeli perspective, the deal is seen as a lifeline to their immediate threats, specifically groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, which they view not as mere proxies, but as direct extensions of the Iranian military.
That distinction is critical. When the U.S. pushes for restraint and ceasefires to keep oil flowing and shipping lanes open, it directly clashes with Israel's existential security goals. The Israeli leadership feels that they are being held back just when they have the military momentum to neutralize these threats. This has led to a visible widening of the rift between the two governments. Israel is increasingly asserting its sovereignty, indicating that it will act unilaterally to protect its borders, regardless of U.S. diplomatic pressure. It shows that even the most historic alliances have breaking points when core national interests diverge.
It is a remarkable paradox. On one hand, you have the US trying to maintain global stability to protect its economy, while on the other, it is facing a domestic push toward isolationism and stricter border control. We are seeing a massive shift in public sentiment regarding immigration and national sovereignty. The focus is turning sharply inward, with policies designed to prioritize domestic citizens for housing, employment, and public assistance. It is a double-sided coin. A nation dependent on global resources for its defense, yet increasingly determined to close its borders and limit foreign integration.
It is the tension between global empire and national sovereignty. You cannot easily maintain a global footprint when the domestic population is demanding a retreat from international commitments to focus on internal stability. Before we dive into a deeper analysis of how these forces interact, let's take a quick break to hear from our network.
Looking for a podcast that actually goes beyond the headlines? Welcome to the New Sentinel, where every episode is a deep, thoughtful journey into the topics that shape our world.
From the dazzling glamour of pop culture, celebrity news, and entertainment, to the strategic complexities of military operations, global security, and international affairs, we cover it all with unmatched depth.
Each episode is carefully crafted with expert interviews, sharp analysis, and compelling storytelling that keeps you completely hooked. Whether you're a pop culture enthusiast who loves the latest trends, or someone fascinated by geopolitics and defense strategy, the New Sentinel delivers the insight and entertainment you've been searching for.
Tune in, stay informed, get entertained. Subscribe today, share your favorite episodes, leave thoughtful comments, and post your most engaging questions. We love hearing from our listeners.
The New Sentinel See Clearer. Think deeper. Available now on all major podcast platforms.
Now, returning to the global board, let's look at this entire landscape through a SWOT analysis. If we analyze the strengths of the current U.S. position, it is their unmatched diplomatic reach and the ability to rapidly deploy financial and corporate incentives to secure new resource deals. But the weakness is glaring. A depleted defense industrial base and a total reliance on foreign supply chains for critical component processing.
On the opportunity side, this crisis could force the US to finally diversify its supply chains and build domestic refining capabilities, while giving African nations the ultimate chance to demand local industrialization. But the threats are severe. If China uses its near monopoly on mineral processing as economic leverage, or if the Middle East peace deal collapses because Israel acts unilaterally to secure its northern border, the global economy could face unprecedented shocks.
To understand how the key players are navigating this, we can apply a MOST analysis, looking at their mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics. The overarching mission for the U.S. right now is to secure national sovereignty and defense resilience in a highly competitive, multipolar world.
And to achieve that mission, their immediate objectives are to rebuild the depleted munitions stockpiles by the end of the decade, stabilize global energy markets, and secure independent mineral pipelines.
Their strategy involves a mix of rapid de-escalation in the Middle East to ease economic pressure, combined with a swift diplomatic pivot to Africa through bilateral resource agreements.
And finally, the tactics. We see this playing out through initiatives like Project Vault, a $10 billion strategic mineral reserve, alongside domestic measures like utilizing local federal partnerships to enforce immigration laws and protect domestic resources. It is a highly coordinated effort to patch up vulnerabilities both abroad and at home.
What is fascinating is how all these pieces connect. The depleted missile stockpile in the U.S. directly increases the value of the soil in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The domestic anxiety over inflation and housing costs drives the political urgency to secure a peace deal with Iran to lower oil prices, which in turn alienates Israel and forces them to fight a unilateral war. Every single geopolitical action has an immediate domestic reaction.
We are moving away from the era of globalized cooperation and entering a period of hard, transactional realism. Power is no longer defined solely by who has the most advanced military technology, but by who controls the raw materials at the very bottom of the supply chain, and who has the political will to protect their own borders. The ground beneath our feet has always held value, but the balance of power is shifting to those who realize that resources do not negotiate, the people standing on them do.
It leaves us with a profound question for the future. As the U.S. scrambles to secure its defense and domestic stability, and as Africa begins to realize the true extent of its leverage, will we see the rise of new global power blocks that completely bypass traditional Western dominance? The clock is ticking, the stockpiles are low, and the world is not waiting to find out.